Friends, thank you for being here today. What if I told you that on January 29th, 2026, Donald Trump made what may be remembered as the most embarrassing strategic blunder of his presidency, threatening to ground an entire nation, its aviation industry based on a fundamental misunderstanding of how aircraft certification works, only to be quietly but decisively shut down by Prime Minister Mark Carney in a response that exposed the hollowness of American threats and the strength of Canadian aerospace sovereignty? And ask yourself this. In an era where economic warfare is increasingly fought through technical regulations, what does it mean when a superpower discovers that its neighbor controls the very infrastructure that keeps American skies safe? The episode began with a social media post that revealed more about American vulnerability than Canadian weakness. At 11:47 p.m. on January 29th, Trump posted, "Based on the fact that Canada has wrongfully, illegally, and steadfastly refused to certify the Gulfstream 500, 600, 700, and 800 jets, we are hereby decertifying their Bombardier Global Expresses and all aircraft made in Canada." The post concluded with a threat of 50% tariffs on all Canadian aircraft. To understand why this threat represents such a spectacular miscalculation, we must examine the realities that make Canadian aviation not just competitive with American aerospace, but in many crucial areas, superior to it. This is not about trade disputes. This is about how a country that controls the longest coastline in the world and has built the most integrated aerospace supply chain on the continent can neutralize threats from larger neighbors simply by understanding geography better than they understand themselves. The immediate reaction revealed the depth of American dependence on Canadian aerospace expertise. Within minutes, aviation lawyers and industry analysts began pointing out the obvious flaw. Paul Jebely, a prominent aviation lawyer, stated bluntly, "The president has no authority to decertify aircraft." The Federal Aviation Administration was reportedly caught off guard and referred all questions to the White House, which could provide no legal mechanism for implementing the threat. But the legal impossibility was only the beginning. The deeper issue lies in the integration that makes American aviation dependent on Canadian expertise, manufacturing, and certification processes. This integration is not an accident of trade policy. It is the result of geographic advantages that Canada possesses and the United States lacks, advantages that cannot be legislated away or threatened into submission. Canada's aerospace industry is built on geographic assets the United States cannot replicate. Our vast territorial expanse provides unlimited airspace for testing. Our stable political system allows long-term planning essential for aerospace development. Our highly educated workforce is concentrated in regions that have been aerospace centers for decades. Most importantly, our regulatory framework has earned a reputation for technical competence and safety standards recognized worldwide. The Bombardier company that Trump threatened represents the culmination of these geographic advantages. Founded in Quebec in 1942, Bombardier has grown into one of the world's leading manufacturers of business jets and transportation systems. The company's success reflects geographic positioning that allows serving both North American and European markets from a single base, regulatory stability enabling long-term R&D investments, and access to natural resources that keep manufacturing costs competitive. The Global Express series that Trump specifically threatened represents some of the most advanced civilian aircraft ever built. The Global 8000, certified by Transport Canada in November 2025 and by the FAA in December 2025, is the fastest civilian aircraft since the Concorde, capable of Mach 0.95. This represents a fundamental shift where Canadian companies are not just competing with American manufacturers, but surpassing them in key performance metrics. The integration between Canadian and American aerospace goes far deeper than trade relationships. According to aviation data company Cirium, there are currently 2,678 Bombardier aircraft registered in the United States, operated by more than 200 different companies. There are 5,125 Canadian manufactured aircraft of various types currently operating in American airspace. These include regional jets operated by major American airlines and military aircraft operated by the U.S. Air Force itself. The U.S. military's dependence on Canadian aerospace technology is particularly revealing. The Air Force operates modified Global Express jets as E-11A aircraft in critical communications missions. The Army relies on Global 6000-based aircraft for multiple programs including Ares, Athena, R, and Hades systems. Trump's threat would have grounded aircraft essential to American national security operations. I want to pause here because the broader implications of this dependency extend far beyond immediate operational concerns. Do you think Trump understood the full extent to which American aviation depends on Canadian technology and certification when he made his threat? And what does this critical dependency reveal about the real balance of power in North American aerospace? Please share your detailed thoughts in the comments below. The extensive economic integration is equally striking. More than half the cost of Bombardier's Global 7500 business jet comes from American suppliers. Wings are manufactured in Texas, avionics systems come from Iowa, and engines are built in Indiana, but but final assembly and certification take place in Canada. This means that Trump's threat was not just aimed at a foreign competitor, but at an integrated supply chain that employs thousands of American workers and generates billions of dollars in American economic activity. Major American airlines have structured their operations around Canadian aircraft. Delta Airlines operates 46 Airbus A220 aircraft that are assembled in Canada. JetBlue operates 10 A220s. These are not experimental or specialty aircraft. They are workhorses of the American aviation system, carrying millions of passengers annually on routes throughout the United States. Trump's threat would have disrupted the operations of major American carriers and stranded American travelers. The response from Prime Minister Mark Carney was swift, measured, and devastating in its precision. Rather than engaging in the kind of rhetorical combat that Trump clearly expected, Carney chose to respond with the calm authority of someone who understands both the technical details of aerospace regulation and the broader strategic implications of the threat. "I expect the U.S. administration to respect Canadian sovereignty," Carney told reporters on January 30th. The statement was brief, professional, and uncompromising. But Carney's public statement was only the visible portion of the Canadian response. Behind the scenes, the Canadian government activated a comprehensive strategy that had been developing since Carney took office, a strategy designed to leverage Canada's aerospace advantages to maximum effect. Transport Minister Steve McKinnon announced that he had been in direct contact with Bombardier's CEO and senior leaders at General Dynamics, which owns Gulfstream. Transport Canada officials are in communication with their U.S. counterparts, and our government is actively working on the situation, McKinnon stated. "Canada's aviation industry is safe and reliable. We will stand behind it." The key phrase in McKinnon's statement was, "We will stand behind it." This was not just a statement of support for Canadian industry. It was a declaration that Canada would use all available tools to protect its aerospace sector from American political interference. Within 24 hours of Trump's threat, it became clear what those tools included. First, Canada initiated a comprehensive review of American aircraft certification requests pending with Transport Canada. The Gulfstream G700 and G800 models that Trump had specifically mentioned were indeed under review, not because of political considerations, but because of technical concerns about ice formation in the fuel system. These concerns had led the FAA to grant the aircraft only limited-time exemptions from certain safety requirements, exemptions that Canada was not obligated to recognize. By simply applying Canadian safety standards consistently, Transport Canada could delay or deny certification for American aircraft that did not meet Canadian technical requirements. Second, Canada activated its regulatory reciprocity agreements with European aviation authorities. Canadian aircraft certification is recognized by the European Union Aviation Safety Agency, meaning that aircraft certified by Transport Canada can operate throughout European airspace without additional approvals. American aircraft that lose Canadian certification would face immediate complications in European markets, as European regulators often coordinate their certification decisions with Canadian authorities. Third, and most strategically significant, Canada began leveraging its position as the hub of integrated North American aerospace supply chains. Bombardier operates 9 major facilities in the United States, employing more than 3,000 American workers directly and supporting an additional 2,800 American suppliers. The company had recently announced plans to expand its operations in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Carney's government made it clear that these expansion plans, and the American jobs they represented, would be reconsidered if the United States proceeded with actions that threatened Canadian aerospace companies. The effectiveness of the Canadian response became apparent within 48 hours. American aviation industry associations began issuing statements opposing Trump's threat. The International Association of Machinists, representing more than 600,000 workers in North America, warned that Trump's actions would cause serious disruption to the North American aerospace industry and put thousands of jobs at risk on both sides of the border. The Aerospace Industries Association expressed grave concern about using safety certification as a tool of trade policy. More importantly, aviation experts began pointing out the technical impossibility of implementing Trump's threat. Richard Abulafia, managing director of Aerodynamic Advisory, noted that mixing safety issues with politics and grievances is an incredibly bad idea, and warned that using certification for trade leverage could undermine the integrity of the entire global aviation safety system. John Graddick, who teaches aviation leadership at McGill University, observed that aircraft certification, especially between Canada and US, has always been very close, with Canadian authorities and the FAA in unison. The markets understood the implications immediately. Bombardier's stock, which had initially fallen 9% on news of Trump's threat, began recovering as investors realized that the threat was both legally unenforceable and economically counterproductive. More tellingly, stocks of American airlines that operate Canadian-built aircraft remained stable, indicating that markets viewed Trump's threat as political theater rather than serious policy. The Gulfstream certification issue that had triggered Trump-as outburst was resolved quietly and professionally through normal regulatory channels. Transport Canada announced that it was working with Gulfstream and the FAA to address the technical concerns about ice formation that had delayed certification. The process would continue according to established safety protocols, without political interference from either side. Trump's attempt to turn a routine technical review into a trade war had accomplished nothing except to highlight American dependence on Canadian aerospace expertise. The broader implications of this episode extend far beyond the immediate dispute over aircraft certification. What Trump's threat revealed, and what Carney's response confirmed, is that Canada possesses strategic leverage in the aerospace sector that cannot be neutralized through political pressure or trade threats. This leverage is based on geographic advantages, technical expertise, and regulatory credibility that have been built up over decades and cannot be easily replicated. The geographic foundation of Canadian aerospace dominance is particularly important to understand. Canada's vast airspace provides unparalleled opportunities for aircraft testing and development. Our northern latitudes offer extreme weather conditions that are essential for certifying aircraft for global operations. Our stable political system provides the regulatory predictability that aerospace companies require for long-term investment planning. Our highly educated workforce is concentrated in regions that have been centers of aerospace excellence for generations. These geographic advantages are complemented by strategic investments in aerospace infrastructure that successive Canadian governments have made over decades. The Bombardier facility in Montreal is not just a manufacturing plant. It is a complete aerospace ecosystem that includes research and development facilities, testing capabilities, certification expertise, and supply chain management. Similar facilities operated by Airbus in Quebec and by other aerospace companies throughout Canada represent billions of dollars in infrastructure investment that cannot be quickly relocated or replicated. The regulatory expertise that Canadian authorities have developed is equally difficult to replace. Transport Canada's reputation for technical competence and safety focus has been built over decades of careful work. Canadian certification is recognized and respected by aviation authorities throughout the world precisely because it is seen as apolitical and technically rigorous. Trump's attempt to politicize the certification process actually strengthened Canada's position by highlighting the contrast between Canadian professionalism and American political interference. The supply chain integration that has developed between Canadian and American aerospace industries represents a complex web of relationships that cannot be disrupted without massive costs to both countries. When Trump threatened Canadian aircraft, he was not just threatening a foreign competitor. He was threatening an integrated system that employs hundreds of thousands of workers, generates tens of billions of dollars in economic activity, and provides critical capabilities to both civilian and military aviation. If you're finding this analysis of Canada's aerospace dominance valuable, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps us continue to provide in-depth coverage of the geographic and economic forces that are reshaping North America. The technological implications of Canada's aerospace position are equally significant. The Global 8000 that Trump indirectly threatened represents the cutting edge of civilian aviation technology. Its Mach 0.95 capability makes it not just the fastest business jet in the world, but faster than many military aircraft. Its range of 8,000 nautical miles allows it to connect any 2 points on Earth with at most one refueling stop. Its advanced avionics and materials technology represent innovations that will influence aviation development for decades to come. This technological leadership is not accidental. It reflects decades of investment in aerospace research and development that Canadian companies and the Canadian government have made. The universities and technical institutes that train Canadian aerospace engineers are among the best in the world. The research facilities where Canadian aerospace technology is developed are equipped with the most advanced testing and development equipment available. The regulatory environment that governs Canadian aerospace development encourages innovation while maintaining the highest safety standards. The contrast with the American approach to aerospace development is instructive. While American aerospace companies have certainly achieved remarkable technological success, they have done so within a regulatory and political environment that is increasingly unpredictable and politically charged. Trump's threat to use aircraft certification as a trade weapon is just the latest example of how American political interference undermines the technical credibility of American regulatory processes. The international implications of this episode extend far beyond the immediate Canada-US relationship. Aviation authorities in Europe, Asia, and other regions were watching carefully to see how the dispute would be resolved. If the United States had proceeded with politically motivated decertification of Canadian aircraft, it would have set a precedent that could have been used by other countries to disrupt global aviation for political purposes. The fact that Canada was able to neutralize Trump's threat without escalation or retaliation strengthened Canada's position as a reliable partner in global aerospace development. Other countries now know that Canada can maintain technical and regulatory independence, even when facing pressure from much larger neighbors. This reputation for independence and professionalism is valuable not just in aerospace, but in all areas of international technical cooperation. The environmental implications of Canadian aerospace leadership are also worth considering. The advanced aircraft that Canadian companies are developing are significantly more fuel efficient and environmentally friendly than older aircraft designs. The Global 8000, for example, produces roughly 30% fewer emissions per passenger mile than comparable aircraft from previous generations. As the world becomes increasingly concerned about aviation's environmental impact, Canadian leadership in developing cleaner, more efficient aircraft becomes strategically important. The military implications of Canada's aerospace position are perhaps the most sensitive, but also the most significant. The fact that the U.S. military relies on Canadian-built aircraft for critical missions reveals the depth of integration between the two countries' defense establishments. But it also reveals American vulnerability. If political disputes were to disrupt the supply of Canadian aerospace technology to American military forces, the consequences could be severe. Carney's handling of this vulnerability was particularly skillful. Rather than explicitly threatening to disrupt military cooperation, he simply made it clear that Canada would defend its aerospace industry using all available tools. The implication was obvious to anyone familiar with the integration of North American defense systems. American political attacks on Canadian aerospace companies could have consequences for American military capabilities. The economic data that emerged in the weeks following Trump's threat confirmed the wisdom of Carney's approach. Far from damaging Canadian aerospace companies, the incident actually strengthened their position. Orders for Canadian aircraft increased as international customers saw Canada's ability to maintain technical independence as a sign of reliability. Investment in Canadian aerospace facilities increased as companies sought to benefit from Canada's reputation for regulatory stability. The contrast with American aerospace companies was striking. Several American manufacturers saw their international orders decline as customers became concerned about the politicization of American certification processes. The threat to use aircraft certification as a trade weapon undermined confidence in American technical objectivity and regulatory independence. The long-term strategic implications of this episode may be the most important of all. What Trump's failed threat demonstrated is that Canada possesses forms of leverage that cannot be neutralized through political pressure or economic coercion. These forms of leverage are based on geographic advantages, technical expertise, and regulatory credibility that have been built up over decades through consistent investment and professional excellence. The aerospace sector is just one example of areas where Canada's geographic position and institutional capabilities provide strategic advantages. Similar advantages exist in telecommunications, where Canadian companies lead the world in Arctic communications technology. In resource extraction, where Canadian expertise in extreme environment operations is unmatched. In transportation, where Canadian companies have developed world-leading capabilities in rail and marine technology. The key insight from Carney, successful defense of Canadian aerospace sovereignty, is that middle powers can maintain their independence from larger neighbors, not through military strength or economic size, but through technical excellence and strategic positioning. By being better at what we do, by building institutions that are more reliable and professional than those of our larger neighbors, by leveraging our geographic advantages intelligently, Canada can maintain sovereignty even when facing pressure from superpowers. The lesson for other middle powers around the world is clear. The age of superpower dominance is not over, but it is changing. Countries that possess strategic advantages based on geography, technology, or institutional excellence can maintain their independence even when facing pressure from much larger neighbors. The key is to understand your advantages, invest in them consistently, and defend them professionally when they are threatened. Trump's embarrassing retreat from his aviation threat represents more than just a tactical failure. It represents a fundamental shift in the balance of power between Canada and the United States in areas where geography and expertise matter more than size and political rhetoric. As we move into an era where technical competence and regulatory credibility are increasingly important sources of international influence, Canada's professional apolitical approach to aerospace development provides a model that other countries are beginning to follow. The skies above North America will continue to be filled with aircraft built in Canada, certified by Canadian authorities, and operated according to Canadian technical standards. Trump's threat accomplished nothing. except to highlight the extent to which American aviation depends on Canadian expertise. Carney's response demonstrated that sovereignty in the 21st century belongs not to the loudest voice, but to the most competent institutions. Thank you.